Hello everybody and welcome to this new podcast from Unusual Art. This is Unusual Art Parallels and I am your host Marios. Today's subject occurred to me while attending university. There, among the myriad of interesting things we learned, there were a few classes that included art in the form of poems and paintings. And then, while listening to my teachers, I had some thoughts. I brushed them aside for the time being, but when I arrived home, these thoughts consumed my brain. Then I had an idea. And that idea is what this two-part podcast is about. This is a tale of creation and destruction. A tale of enthusiasm and sadness. This is Unusual Art. As many of you saw the title, you might wonder, what is this idiot talking about? How can an ancient myth compare with some turbo engines from 40 years ago? Well, be patient and you will find out. So the first part of our story starts with the well-known tale of Daedalus and Icarus. Daedalus and Icarus, an ancient Greek myth famously recorded by the Roman poet Ovid in his Metamorphoses. This excerpt is taken from the site thecollector.com. So, the story of Daedalus and Icarus begins way before the birth of Icarus. Daedalus, as the myth goes, was an unparalleled sculptor. In one of Plato's dialogues, Socrates mentions a legend that Daedalus' sculptures had to be tied down, otherwise they would run away. Daedalus' art was so lifelike that it ended up coming to life. It is no coincidence that many ancient wooden cult images in multiple Greek temples were said to be his works. Pausanias, the travel writer of the 2nd CE century, saw quite a few of those images that were believed to belong to the legendary sculptor and wrote that they captured a sense of the divine. But Daedalus was more than a skillful artist. He was also an inventor. The ancients attributed a series of inventions to him, the most important being carpentry. In a sense, Daedalus was the mythical equivalent of a Renaissance man. Some would say like a Da Vinci. However, there was a darker side to Daedalus. The inventor was the greatest of his era, but there was a brief time when he faced serious competition. According to Ovid, Daedalus was born in Athens, other sources claim he was Cretan, and had quickly become a respectable citizen due to his skill and intellect. His sister believed that her son Talos, in other sources he can also be found as Kalos or Perdix with many names, could greatly benefit by studying next to his uncle in Athens. Little did she know. Daedalus took Talos and taught him everything he knew. The boy was young and quite witty. He quickly took in all the knowledge and began applying it to the world around him. Daedalus soon realized, however, that the boy was not simply smart, it was smarter than him. If Talos continued this way, Daedalus would be completely overshadowed by Talos. So, what did he do? He threw Talos off the cliff of the Acropolis. The goddess Athena saved Talos, however, by transforming him into a bird that received his mother's name, Perdix. Still, Daedalus was tried for this act and he was eventually banished from Athens. After his expulsion from Athens, Daedalus found refuge in the court of King Minos, the mythical king of Crete. Minos ruled the seas with a mighty fleet that had no equal. With Daedalus in his court, he became an unstoppable force. During his time in the court of Minos, Daedalus had the chance to start over. It was there that he got a son of his own by a slave called Navkrati. The boy's name was Icarus. However, there is absolutely no information about Icarus's early life, nor his relationship with his father. Daedalus could have lived peacefully in Crete. However, one day he was suddenly asked to offer his assistance to Pasiphae, Minos' wife. Pasiphae wanted to accomplish one of the most despicable acts imaginable: mate with an animal, and more specifically, a bull. Everything had begun when Minos had asked Poseidon to send him a sign of divine favor in the form of a beautiful bull. The king promised that he would return the animal in the form of a sacrifice. The god granted Minos' wish, and a uniquely beautiful bull appeared from the sea. Minos was glad to see that Poseidon favored him, but he was not keen on sacrificing the animal. Instead, he decided to keep the bull and sacrifice another one in his place. Poseidon had honored his side of the deal, but Minos had not. Punishment was imminent and arrived in the form of a divine madness that took over Pasiphae. Minos' wife became unable to control an impulse to mate with the bull that Poseidon had sent. Unable to perform the act as the bull had also turned disobedient, she asks for Daedalus' help. To solve Pasiphae's problem, Daedalus carved a wooden cow on wheels. He then took it, hollowed it out in the inside, sewed it up in the hide of a cow, which he had skinned, and set it in the meadow in which the bull used to graze. Pasiphae got inside the wooden effigy, which tricked the bull. The woman finally got what she wanted. From the union of the human and animal, the Minotaur was born, half man and half bull. But this is a story for another time. So when Minos saw the terrible creature, he asked Daedalus to construct a labyrinth in order to hide it there. Minos later used the Minotaur to maintain a reign of terror over Athens by asking for 7 young women and 7 young men from the city to be fed to the beast as a tribute. Eventually, Theseus, an Athenian hero, came to Crete and slew the Minotaur with the help of Ariadne, Minos' daughter. Some ancient writers even claim that Daedalus played a part and helped the couple in their quest for the Minotaur's head. According to Ovid, at some point Daedalus grew to hate Crete and decided to return to his home. However, Minos was determined to keep the inventor near him, even if that meant imprisoning him. Other writers claim, however, that Minos threw Daedalus in a cell after learning about his role in Pasiphae's sin, Theseus' escape, or simply to keep the mysteries of the labyrinth a secret. Life in prison was not easy, but at least Daedalus was not alone. His dear son Icarus was still there with him. Still though, Daedalus was desperate to escape Crete. He, Minos, may thwart our escape by land or sea, but the sky is surely open to us. We will go that way. Minos rules everything, but he does not rule the heavens. This is what Daedalus apparently said. And so, Daedalus did what he knew best. He thought out of the box. The result of his creative fever could be an invention that would haunt the imagination of the whole Western world for millennia until humanity finally conquered the sky. Daedalus is said to have studied the movements of birds and built a device that was mimicking them. He then laid down multiple feathers in a row, from shortest to longest, and tied them together using beeswax and thread. All this time, Icarus was playing with the feathers, laughing without realizing that he was touching what would eventually bring his tragic end. When Daedalus finished, he wore the wings. Daedalus and Icarus stared at each other as the father flew in front of his son. He looked at Icarus and explained to him how he should use the wings and what he should avoid. "Let me warn you, Icarus, to take the middle way in case the moisture weighs down your wings. If you fly too low or if you go too high, the sun scorches them. Travel between the extremes, and I order you not to aim towards Bootes, the herdsman, or Hellas, the great bear, or towards the drawn sword of Orion. Take the course I show you." Daedalus' warnings and instructions had a dramatic tone to them. He understood that this was no game, but a trip that could end badly. The fear for his son's life was overtaking him. Tears were leaving his eyes, and his hands were shaking. Icarus's reactions showed that he did not recognize the dangers of the flight. Yet there was no other choice. Daedalus approached Icarus and gave him a fatherly kiss. Then he took to the sky again, leading the way while teaching Icarus how to use his wings properly. Ovid also writes that a plowman, a shepherd, and an angler saw Daedalus and Icarus flying from the distance and believed them to be gods, a scene famously depicted in the painting Landscape with the Fall of Icarus. Daedalus and Icarus flew and left Crete behind them. Now they were out of Minos's reach, but not safe. As they were approaching the island of Samos, Icarus turned arrogant. He felt an unconquerable urge to fly towards heaven, as close to the sun as he could. Ignoring his father's warnings, he flew higher and higher, until the wax that held the wings together melted and he began falling at speed. Icarus tried to fly, but his hands were now naked. The only thing left to him was to scream his father's name. "Father! Icarus! Icarus, where are you? Which way should I be looking to see you?" screamed Daedalus. But Icarus had already drowned into the dark sea, which would eventually become known as the Icarian Sea. "Icarus!" he screamed again, but received no reply. Finally, Daedalus found the body of his son floating amidst feathers. Cursing his inventions, he took the body to the nearest island and buried it there. The island where Icarus was buried was named Icaria. Daedalus had just buried his son when a little bird flew next to his head. It was his nephew Talos, now called Perdix, who had returned to enjoy the suffering of the man who had almost killed him out of spite. This is how Daedalus and Icarus' myth comes to an end. The story of Daedalus and Icarus is quite similar to another Greek myth, the fall of Phaethon. Phaethon was the son of Apollo. In the myth, Phaethon insists on driving the chariot of the sun. Even though Apollo warns him time and time again that this will bring about his end, Phaethon does not back down. Finally, Phaethon gets what he wants, only to realize that he does not have what it takes to control the chariot's horses. He then falls and meets his end. Like Daedalus, Apollo grieves for his son, but nothing can bring him back. Interestingly, Ovid wrote about Icarus and Phaethon as well as about Talos or Perdix in his Metamorphoses. In these three stories, the theme of a young ambitious man falling in a tragic manner is common. In all three stories, the fallen meet their ends after they attempt to surpass a certain limit that they were not supposed to. Icarus flies too close to the sun. Phaethon insists on driving the sun's chariot, even if he is warned that he will die this way, and Talos surpasses Daedalus in inventiveness. The lesson of these stories appears to be that a son should not rush to surpass the father. Is it though? Amazing stuff, isn't it? But someone must still wonder, what do these stories mean? And more specifically, what does any of that have to do with Group B rallying? Well, to find out, stay tuned for the second part of this podcast, and you shall receive your answers. Until then, I thank every single one of you that listened to the end. If you found this interesting and you liked it, push the like button, subscribe to the channel and press the bell button to be informed when my next podcast or video comes out, and share it to your friends. I was your host Marios, and until next time, have a nice time.